Hey everyone, Joe Lyons here in Dallas, Texas.
Yeah, and Jackie here in Copenhagen.
And today for our short talk, we were going to talk about how to create a more polished, quote unquote, script, right? And how, and I guess partially why. A lot of things, and I'll just start off with a lot of things for me. I don't spend extra time to polish them because I run them on my computer and I'm not sharing them with anybody. They run in my environment, right? I don't have to do, and if something goes wrong with it later, I just fix it, right? What we're talking about is, what if you're going to be sharing this, or actually let's even dial it up a notch higher. What if you're charging people for access to the tool? And you got to make sure that it is, it's as many bugs have been worked out as you can. But how do you get to that level, right? And so that's what we want to discuss today.
Yeah, and it is a great thing because I remember when starting out with AutoHotkey, hotkeys made total sense. Really, really, really good at making yourself more efficient.
Mm-hmm.
But it's hard to convey the usefulness of whichever keys you chose to others. So yeah, to me, it might have made a great sense to use F8
Yeah.
for switching windows or whatever I used it for.
Yeah.
But the guy on the next table, he was like, what was the button I was supposed to click?
Right.
Or yeah, and so yeah, at some point, hotkeys makes a good addition to your own efficiency, but you need to have some kind of way to convey at least a list of the keys that your script uses. I at least found that out at some point.
Or build in a way, because I've seen them, right? Build in a way that allows the user to choose for themselves, right? To change it to what makes sense to them.
Yeah, and totally. If you want to make something that is at that level, but to me this was before going into, let's say, a GUI and something like that. But yeah, you could maybe make the simplest way I'm thinking is to use the hotkey functionality and have an ini file with hotkeys in it as an example, right? So you could load and save and do stuff with that. So it would be quite simple without you having to make a GUI. Then you could tell them to go into the ini file and change the key instead of having some kind of built-in way.
Yeah. So getting back to our topic overall, but so one of the first things, I would, especially with which Jackie's mentioned the GUIs a couple times, GUIs themselves, when you actually program a GUI, man, they're notorious for just switching between the computer, or even just switching on a laptop where you run this laptop and then you come back and plug in a monitor, right? And the resolutions change. That that is the first thing. Make sure you work on that. Make sure you use classes or whatnot to, if you have your script to where the GUIs are adjustable, right? You need to be able to handle different resolutions.
Yeah, I'd say for the most part, I've opted for the static GUI.
Yeah, me too.
The one where almost everything is hard coded, the size of the window, the placement of the controls, stuff like that. Whereas at work, I would be the first one to point at a website and say, "Oh my God, how are they? This is in no way dynamic. How can they have that much white space and such small buttons or something like that?" Because, but yeah, I've taken the easy way out myself, mostly with GUIs. Whereas, one should actually make them more dynamic for the most part.
Well, but the point is just to make sure you test it, right? Because even with what Jackie is saying, because I do the same thing, because I don't build complex GUIs. Maestria see do stuff, and he's amazing, and he can deal with the scalability stuff because he's written some classes for it, but those are way beyond me. But just make sure that, like, change your monitor to a smaller resolution to what a laptop would be using, and that way you can say, like, oh, because I've done that before. I've written something, here you go, and then the OK button's off the screen, and they can't see anything, right? It's a terrible experience.
Yeah, and one of those that I at least have seen also is with text size.
Yeah.
So right now the name of it is eluding me, but yeah, a GUI that is. Why am I thinking API? That's not correct. It's DPI. Is that
the
more?
DPI? Yeah.
Right, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly right. Where that can really also be detrimental to the look of a GUI.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. That IWB2 Learner tool, right? That had a bug, not a bug, but it didn't take that into account for years. So if you were using IE and it wasn't at 100%, if you were at 125% in the zoom level, or the DPI off, the rectangle where you dragged it to would be incorrect. And then I wish Romnek, I can't remember his name, but he was doing his. I'm like, hey, he had mentioned something. I'm like, yeah, I don't know how to do that. He's like, oh, I can fix that. And in like an hour, the guy wrote back and had updated the code to take it into account. I'm like, oh, thank God. But yeah, it was like, wow, that annoyed me for years. I always had to stay at 100% zoom on IE to make this tool work. And anyway, so he fixed it.
Yeah, and these are things that one with your own system, with a single system, with a single machine, that you can quite easily test, because you can simply change it and change it back again, and you will see the effects on your end. And so those are really great to have. And where it becomes more complex is if you want to test on multiple OSs,
yeah,
with different hardware, or just different levels of driver versions, or
different environments. Like, I don't know how to phrase it properly, but like a work computer and a home computer, right?
Yeah.
They're configured very differently usually, and
Yeah, one of the things, my home computer, I often have at least some kind of admin privileges.
That's a great point.
I might not always have all of them, but at some point after having it for some time, I will have most privileges, because it just is irritating to answer those different pop-ups all the time, stuff like that. Yeah. So yeah, taking stuff into a work PC. I remember doing that at one point where I had used that small snippet. I don't know if is admin. That is a snippet that exists.
Yep.
And it actually kept the one I had chosen, would keep trying to make the script admin.
Right.
And if it didn't succeed, it would close the script, but run it again, some VDA, to try and make it admin. And I actually ended up crashing a work computer by having that single snippet, because it would never be allowed to actually become admin.
Elevate,
yeah. And there was no sleep, there was nothing. Right. So in the end, I couldn't interact with the script, and it just ran, and me trying to scramble to get it to stop, and I couldn't. And yeah, the system died before I actually made it into the task list. But yeah.
But so which is all of this so far, basically you can pretty much do on your own, right? As long as you have access to another computer's net. But then there's the next level, which if you are having other people use the code, right? We all think very differently, and making sure people understand where things are. Jackie actually just earlier, he was walking me through this game on where things were in the net, and I had never played it. I played it a little bit, but it was not at all how I would have. Actually, I didn't mention, Jackie, one of the things where the champions were, I thought where they were in the middle was where they're supposed to be. When you put them in the middle, then they're actually in the game, not on the side as when they're in the game. I had it in my head, it was reversed. And I was like, why is this not, I'm doing this? And I'm like, oh no, wait a minute. Those are over there. So it's just those things of like, hey, is your program intuitive to people? You know, is it designed in a way that the way people think, right? Which we think everyone thinks like we do. And trust me, we don't.
Yeah, and we've talked about that at length, right, Joe? That you can think that you're explaining something at 100% perfection, but yeah, the first guy, he's thinking, oh, I get about 70% of this, but the other guy on the other, he's getting 13%. He's just like, what's this guy talking about? Half the time I don't even understand the words he's using, or whatever it might be, right? No. Or they just zoning out because
who's right? Yeah, did I leave the oven on at home? I don't know.
Exactly.
Got a date later, whatever. Yeah. I actually attended it was a pre-webinar. It was a friend of mine that was hosting it on SEO and all this other stuff. And so he asked for feedback, and I'm like, you covered a lot of stuff at very, very different levels. And I'm like, I understood it all because I was familiar with the stuff, but people that are new to this are not going to understand the vast majority of it. And then people that are familiar with it, for the most part, they know it all, so I'm like, I'm not sure, who you're pleasing here, but it's one of those things to take into account, right? Of your user level. And actually, so another one, Jackie and I, we were talking about just the taskbar and just how you name things. And like, does everyone know when you say, you're offering help and, put it, make sure it's on your taskbar, which is a good part of the saying is make good documentation, clear, even showing pictures, or I love videos, right? Obviously. And I'll do a video recording. It's so much easier to talk through it and literally show what happens than it is to try to document images in a Word file and write it all up. Because when you literally show the action that you do, people can replay it as, to their heart's content, and it really helps.
Yeah. And again, I'm at my work. I often try and help people get through new websites or new programs, and they might turn to me to get support, even if it's something I don't really know, but just with having a good inkling of how programs work and having no fear of clicking stuff and actually reading what a text box says helps a lot. And by that, but if I say something like you said with the taskbar, or if I say, can you click that, but it's on a mobile device, they might actually not get what I'm meaning because tap it. But to me, it's just like, I want you to interact with that element there.
Yeah, and you can't say it that way because no one will understand what you're saying.
Yeah, right? Exactly.
But yeah, it's a great point with anyone, right? Anything you do when you're in any way presenting or whatever, make sure you understand who you're presenting to and their vocabulary and their level of expertise, right? Because you need to know all of those things to do a good job.
Yeah, and it just fits with how you try to make a polished script, right, or program for that matter, is at least with the ones I've done, I've really tried to take in feedback and maybe look at how others did it before, and at least for myself, I might have a really, really strong feeling about what's best, or how it looks well, or how I want stuff to be conveyed. But when it then comes into someone else who hasn't had any kind of introduction to the program, they ask about totally different things. either because the things that I've made are so well documented that they can focus on other things, or because I ended up focusing on something that just wasn't as important as I thought it would be.
Right.
So yeah, if you can get it in the hands of users, might be the best way of saying it. I'm not even sure you need to get it in the hand of testers. It's better to get it in the hands of the actual user, so that you can get some real feedback. Again, I don't know exactly how you do it either. If you talked about something that was paid, I don't know how many actually have that, but yeah.
Let me tell you the one we just did, because I think I've told Jackie, I'm not sure if I've told everybody. We have I have a business partner in real estate, and we have an app we've created, and then we wanted to get it where the app is targeting like people that are FedEx drivers and Uber drivers, right? And we're like, okay, well, before we go, and really go to business, we want to get some feedback from them, so we make some tweaks to the app, right, and then go full scale. And so we're like, okay, well, I can go on LinkedIn and I can find Uber drivers, and I'm doing the stuff. And then I'm like, hey, how about this instead? How about we plan a pub crawl, and we're going to go to a bar, and we'll take an Uber to the bar, and in the drive there, we'll on the way, we'll explain what we're doing, and we'll get their feedback in like 5 minutes, and then we'll go have a beer, and then we'll call Uber again and take us to the next place, right? And so we spent like 5 hours going from bar to bar, but getting really, it was you're spot on, right? The better you can get your users testing your thing that truly represent your target market, right? That's ideal, right? That's what you want. That helps. But if you can have a few beers in the way, that doesn't hurt.
Yeah, and again, I ended up having, at least some years back, a product where one of my buddies, he said, I'm sure you can sell that to some, I know these people over here, they'd be very interested. And I was like, yeah, but it just has some hotkeys and stuff that I know. I'm not sure that other people can use that. And he's like, I'm pretty sure, if please write some kind of manual, just a few lines of stuff. And I did that, and sure enough, they were very happy to buy into it. And I didn't need to make anything really, really fancy, because it had the functionality that they wanted. But afterwards, I've made stuff where the GUI might be a copy of other things and stuff like that. But yeah, it really is a good idea to get some user feedback on your ideas or your layout or your functionality.
Yeah, that one, and this is more of actually, I was going to say it's a personal preference, but it really shouldn't be. It should be a preference of your target market. Some people, if you want something looking really cool, you may not use the built-in like list views or tree views or whatnot that's built in AutoHotkey, because it needs to be much fancier looking, for lack of a better term. Me personally, I'll design stuff where people in the business world will use it. They don't care about all the fluff, right? I'm sure it would impress them to some degree if it was there, but as long as it's functional and it's clean and they can understand it, that is a much bigger thing for them. But tailor it to your audience.
Yeah, one thing I just thought about, or I had thought about it before, is that Joe DF, he made a few functions, or he made it available. I'm not sure he was the first creator of it, but at least he made it more accessible to use HTML for your GUI by showing some great examples and stuff like that.
Oh, I remember that post. Yeah.
Each time I think about doing a GUI with HTML, I end up not doing it, because HTML, CSS, and functions to handle the events that happens and stuff like that. I would love to have the look and the dynamity. That's not the correct word, but something that was as dynamic as a website
Yeah.
a web page for a GUI. But yeah, I totally lack some kind of GUI writer. Might be. A few people have made those for the standard controls.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and I know that there are some good editors for HTML and web pages, and there's even some drag and drop stuff. But to me, the issue becomes that you then need to build all of those custom events into the code afterwards. I would love to see something, a custom HTML GUI builder, right?
Yeah, Maestricht, he built a message box, which is pretty amazing. I had him record a video, but he wasn't done with his class yet, so I need to go back to him and have him demonstrate it again, because it was, as you mentioned, it did the CSS and everything. It was so flexible, yet I don't know CSS and I don't know the HTML that well, and so for me, I'm like, holy cow, I don't know if I can use this without having like 5 to 10 examples, exactly the stuff. But regardless, to your point, yeah, it's you can definitely do some amazing stuff with AutoHotkey, making it prettier. I had one final for me at least point was, even though we just said get user feedback, it's really helpful, really critical. Make sure you don't bias it with your own opinions of thinking I know better than them necessarily. Having said that, you can never please everybody, right?
No.
So don't try to please don't kill yourself, because it really will, trying to please everybody. So, do your best to do what makes sense to you, the way it, you think it works. Try to get like a majority of people that like it a certain way, but don't worry if there's onesie twosies that want certain things that you don't want, right? Or it just doesn't make sense.
I remember a program I have out there where a few customers, or at least a good amount of customers, were paying for it. And at some point, the program that it was interacting with updated, and I made an update that seemed to fix it on my system, and I was happy, and I released the update, and not long after, a few users they contacted me and said it's not working correctly, and I was like, that's weird. And then a few more came and said it's not working correctly. And still, there's only maybe 5% of users or something to that amount, right? So it wasn't that many, but the program had many, maybe it had under 100 users, but maybe 4 or something actually came forth and said the exact same thing. And I scrambled to make that fix and get it out there. And then it turned out I actually broke it for 70 people, something like that. So it's just like, don't always jump on whatever feedback you get. As you said, kind of like you can't please everybody. And it turned out to be a very few that had a specific setup that made it not work for them with that setup. So yeah,
as a general business rule, that's the other thing is, remember the 80-20 rule, and the 80-20 rule applies also to the pain in the neck people. 20% of your customers they're going to take up the vast majority of your time, right? And hey, if you're in the sense that you can just say, you know what, I hear you, and I'm not making the change, like whatever, and just say, I'll give your money back, whatever, right? Like, because your headaches go away. It's so much easier, if you're in a position to do that, then, by all means, do it.
Yeah, right. And I needed to learn that in some aspects, at least, that there are just some, it's rare, but there are a few where you just simply need to cut a line and say, yeah, sorry, but I can't make that work for you.
This book I just recently read, it had a rule. It was the 80-20-30 rule. And he said, if you do what I just mentioned, so that you lose the 20% of the people that take up 80% of your time, you're going to end up being 30% more profitable. And that's because that extra time you get back, it's so much that you can actually develop whole new things targeting your customers that are actually really good, that spend money and do stuff, right? And your bottom line really gets affected. It's huge. So it's something to really think about.
Yeah, absolutely.
Awesome. Is there anything else that we're not thinking about on this?
About polished scripts?
Yeah, or just making sure it's all tightened up. I guess, correct me if I'm wrong, but probably stick with 32-bit to be safe, right? As a general rule.
Yeah, at least for now, right? Yep. Again, I at least have found that it can remove a good amount of headache.
Cool.
Yeah.
The other one is to, and I actually ran into this the other day. Compile your script and then put it on another computer entirely that doesn't have any of your library files or anything, right? Because I was surprised. I thought when I compiled my script, my icon, that I had a custom icon, and I thought it packed it up with it, but whatever I did, it didn't. So I gave it to the client, and he's like, "Oh, it's breaking in this line." I'm like, "Oh, it." For some reason, I thought that got packed up with it, and I did test it on another computer before I did it. The problem is I have exactly the same configurations on all my computers with the same paths, and so it's still found. I put it in my temp folder, and I tried it on the other computer, but it still had the resources, that it was pulling from.
Yeah. Yeah, and that kind of goes to the same thing that we talked about a couple of webinars ago with the Dells being cached and stuff like that. It can really be hard to get around everything.
Yeah.
But yeah. It's just a good idea. If you can get it out of your hands and into someone else's, that is really a big step.
Yep. Awesome. Well, good call. Let's end it when we're not way over time.
Absolutely, Joe.
All right, man. Take care. It's good fun.
Yeah, you too. Yeah, bye.